Yeah, so I mean, does anyone have any comments on like the basic shape of the object? You guys are super live today. I like it. I do actually like, it looks like in your render you made like a separate glass panel for the screen, and you have like a little inset behind it. Yeah. Is that, I mean, yeah, that's a nice touch. Like I can see that exists. That's cool. Alright, let's see. Is it files? Alrighty. Let's see what your topology is like. Cool. The other, wait, what?
The other two photos are still there.
I don't know. It's probably, I haven't set the project or anything like that, so it's probably why. I'm not too, I mean, I have a Switch. I can tell that this looks like a Switch. So I'm not terribly concerned about that right now. Okay, I'm gonna, alright. And this is clearly, it looks like this was pretty clearly designed to be a low poly model. I ask because if I smooth this, it gets kind of like wiggly on. What? I mean, when I smoothed it, the first thing I was like, oh look, it looks like you beveled this corner, and then there's like a giant end on from that. Is that? Yeah. So, say again?
Could you merge that to the side? I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. That's fair. In this case, what I'd probably do. Let me see. So actually, so when I look at this, and I actually thought that like these edge loops were going down like buttonholes or something like that. But you could totally make this with like a third this amount of geometry. And if you wanted to do that, so I'm going to just like throw in something that's kind of, sure, that's fantastic looking. Every time I'm like, I'm not gonna fix this, like it's fine, and then I start fixing it and I can't stop. It's great. Anywho, okay, yeah, so if this was the rough shape of like the switch control, what I'd want to do is add in, I'll make it, I guess, the same way you did, where the button's attached. If you ever wanted to in the future, like you could totally make a cutout for the button, and then just add a separate piece of geometry in. Like since the button is like a physically separate object on the actual switch, if you want to
make like a rectangle on that curve,
yeah, pretty much. If you wanted to do that, that's like the kind of thing. So like on the final, it would be expected where like if you had a button in your thing, you'd have like a hole behind the button. For like the first weekly assignment, it's like not too much of a thing, but you should definitely start practicing like adding buttonholes and like more details to your model. Especially because like in later, so it's like this class is like one model for the final, and then like in the other classes you're gonna take in this sort of like CGI2 or like any of the animation classes, they're gonna pretty much expect you to do like 80% of the work for the final of this class in like a week. So the more practice you get, the more efficient you're gonna get. And then it'll just make your life easier down the road. But anyway, so I need edge loops for this button here, so that I have somewhere to actually allow it to stick up. So I'm just going to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool, and I will just be like, cool, these are going to be the borders of my button, and I also need a border like on this edge here. So cool, now I have like the world's ugliest potential button. So if I make this model to be, if I design this model to be smoothed, I'd want to hit 3, and then I could actually, I could define the curve of this edge here with just another edge loop. So that's perhaps a bit aggressive. Yeah, you can kind of get the point. Move this one down a little bit. Alright, that gives, I'm just going to say that's like kind of the curve of the switch-ish. And then I could go through and just take these faces for the button And if I extrude those, drag. Extrude doesn't like 90-degree quarters too much, but I can just kind of fudge that. I'll just grab this edge for now and just be like, ooh, that's kind of like extrude. So now I have like this really janky looking button and controller, which is like obviously the lines on this are way too soft. So again, just like with the rule of threes, I would just have to go through and add some more holding edge loops to all the sides to get to be the shape that I wanted. The more complicated your object, the more horrifically tedious this gets. But, so I know that I'm going to need a loop over here to harden up this edge a little bit. So this loop is kind of functioning as holding the rounded corner over here, like this loop here, and this guy. So I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to add any more loops over here like this. What I do want to do, though, is maybe add another loop to kind of round off that corner ever so slightly at the bottom. And then since these edges here also look pretty hard, I would just put an edge loop here and closer to the back, so that you would have a more hardened looking switch. So you'll notice, so like, it's still like clearly supposed to be a pointed corner, but it has like that kind of natural roundness to it, like you would might expect. It's like a little bit less harsh than this edge here. So any questions on what I've done so far for this? Cool. So you will notice, like, obviously, the button still looks like kind of horrific. The first thing is, like, it pretty much looks like it's melting off of the side of the controller here. And that's just because I didn't define an edge loop, so it's sticking straight out of the model. And when I smooth this, it's basically trying to pull this edge down this way, since there's nothing here telling it to not do that. So if I smooth this again, and then I go in, I'll add an edge loop. That's supposed to be a pretty hard line, so we'll just add it really, really close to that loop, or to the bottom of this little button. And you can see that that hardens it pretty immediately-ish, and it stops that weird pulling there. I would also need a loop on each side of this button to make the button itself hard. And you can see here that this is, again, a little bit curvy. So just throw in a loop like this, and that'll harden that. The next thing that so the next thing that needs to get hardened is like this corner of the button. For this, I'd probably just throw an edge loop directly on top of, or not directly, what am I saying? Sorry. I would just put an edge loop in, like, right in here. It's gonna cut ever so slightly into the curve of the object, but, like, not enough to really be noticeable, so I'm not gonna worry too much about that. So I'll just throw that in, and now the side of the button is flatter. I did forget one more edge loop. Wow, sorry. So you'll notice, like, here there's an edge loop to harden the side of the button. I need to add, so this one, alright. So like this here is my original edge, which is like the official where I want the border of the controller to stop and the button to start. So on the one side I have this edge loop on the button to harden the button side. I need another edge loop on this side to harden the controller side, if that makes sense. So if I hit G to get my insert edge loop tool back again, I'll just throw that edge in there. And you can see that that is a little bit harder in here. So like this side where I did not put in that edge loop, you can see it's like it's a bit softer, and then here it's much harder. Does that make sense? Cool. And then I also forgot to do the other edge loop on this side of the button here. You can see this tip is like still a little bit rounded. It's because I forgot this edge loop, so when I add that, the controller gets much harder. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, adding edge loops is like insanely tedious. Like, but it just needs to be done sometimes. So that's pretty much how I would add the edge loops themselves. If I was perhaps not quite happy with the, like, this looks like a little bit more of a rounded curve, I might just grab this corner here and just sort of drag it until it was something that I was, like, happier with, maybe. But yeah, so I mean, that's how I would make this shape, and it uses, like, the topology ends up being a lot simpler. So, like, if I And I'm just doing control. So control 1, whatever you have selected, it'll isolate select that. So it'll display only that on the screen. You can also access that by clicking show, isolate select, and just click the view selected button. But yeah, so like on this, I could actually get rid of pretty much all of this, and also all of these, like, pretty much all of these. If this is going to be a low poly model, I could get rid of, like, all of this and not affect the shape at all. So, yeah, I don't know, just a random thing to keep in mind. So it's a random tangent. But any more questions about, like, smoothing the object like this?
You made the button shape already on this, but it looks weird. Is there a way, like, shrink it without changing?
Probably the least horrible way to do that. I mean, ideally, like, pay attention to what you're doing to start with, obviously, but, turn off my grid because I find it distracting. Like, ideally, I would probably just fudge it a little bit. I actually think this looks terrible the way I moved it over, so I'm gonna do that. But, like, what I could do is just, go into one of my orthographic modes, and just marquee select and drag. I'll just grab the vertices on the top of the button and just push them down in, and, like, then grab these verts on the side and push those in. So the button is now a significantly lower profile. If I smooth it, it looks much more like your object.
What were you pressing or holding to delete the edge loops?
Oh, so to delete an edge loop, yeah, so, oh, okay, so, to delete it without deleting the object? Okay, so you just go into your edge select mode, so right click on, if you have your object selected, just hold down right mouse button, and then just hover above edge, release your mouse button, and then it should be in edge select mode. So if you just double click on whatever edge loop you want to get rid of, there's basically 2 ways to delete it. One can kind of break your model. So if you just press delete or just press backspace, it'll get rid of the edge, but you'll notice that it leaves the vertices behind. So like now this entire thing is just like one giant n-gon of awful with, because there's like these weird floating vertices here. If you ever have these in your mesh, you just like accidentally forget to delete them or whatever when you get rid of the edge. While you're in vertice select mode, you can just marquee select over the entire object, so it selects all of the vertices, and just hit delete. It'll only get rid of the ones that are like in the middle of an edge, or like ones that have, yeah, pretty much. It'll keep anything where it has a vertice with 3 or more edges connected to it. So if it's like a vert with 2 edges connected, so like something in the middle of a straight line, pretty much, it'll get rid of that. That's the easiest way to get rid of that. The other way to not need to worry about the vertices is just click on your edge, and if you hold down Control while you press delete, it should delete the edge and the vertices as well. So like if I go into vertex mode, you'll notice that now there's no like weird vertices hanging out here. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Sweet. What was I doing? Oh yeah, so getting rid of the n-gon in here. So what I'd probably do, like if it was a curved corner like this, I mean I could, if I wanted to, just like extrude this. Yeah, and be like, boom, it's done. It's kind of weird. Like honestly, there are times when I will shamelessly leave a model. Like if this is a low poly model going into a game, your game engine is not going to care about this, really at all. The only downside to having all of these tries here is like if you needed to insert an edge loop or something around like this area, like through here, the tool is gonna stop because it does not work on tries or n-gons. So I mean, what you could do if you wanted to is like, let me see. So actually, ideally there would actually be an edge loop already. Like you have one to start the bevel. I think I accidentally deleted the one at the bottom of the bevel, so I'm just going to add that back. And to add that back, I'm just going to insert an edge loop. It's going to run around the entire model where there's quads. And then I'll just do the multi-cut tool, which is Mesh Tools multi-cut, and I'll just draw in this line and connect it back to the area over here. Yay. Happy days. At which point now I would probably scrap these and do an extrude. And if you get rid of this one like weird little edge guy here, technically this becomes a quad, but that's like usually not a huge concern. I'd probably just terminate it like this most of the time if it's going to be a low poly model. Like, that should be fine. Normally I'd recommend if you're gonna design an object to be smooth like I did over here, you'd probably want to not use a bevel and just like use the additional edge loops to harden the object. Bevel's better for like low poly stuff like this. But yeah. I mean, it looks like the overall like shapes and topology of stuff are good. I think just most of my, oh yeah, it looks like there's like definitely some n-gons. I think most of like I said, I think the shaping on this looks pretty good. Just watch out for n-gons. Yeah. So any final questions before we move on to the next person? Cool. Anyone else want to volunteer as tribute? All right. Select a random person. After I figure out where my files are. Oh, whoops. 5 seconds. I gotta plug in my computer, which I forgot to do.